Long before the pyramids, before written language, and even before fire was truly mastered there, walked a human who would forever alter the fate of our species. Not a thinker, not yet a builder, but a traveler, a survivor, a pioneer. That human was Homo erectus. As a historian with 2 decades devoted to ancient human evolution, I can say without hesitation, Homo erectus was not just another link in the chain of human ancestry. They were a revolution in evolutionary force that carried the torch of survival farther than any hominin before them. Roughly 2.8 million years ago, the genus Homo emerged on the rugged plains of East Africa. The earliest known member, Homo habilis, whose name means handyman, was a primitive but promising leap from earlier Australopithecines, equipped with a slightly larger brain and a knack for crafting rudimentary stone tools. Homo habilis marked the dawn of something new yet. Life remained perilous. Predators stalked every corner, shelter was minimal, and survival was fragile. For nearly 1 million years, early humans eked out a life in harsh climates. Always one drought, one injury, or one predator away from extinction. Then, around 1.9 million years ago, evolution took a bold turn. Enter Homo erectus, upright man. This was not merely a better version of Homo habilis. Homo erectus was a game-changer. With a taller, more robust frame, longer limbs, and a significantly larger brain, they didn't just survive their environment, they began to dominate it. But to understand their full impact, we must revisit their discovery. In the 19th century, scientists believed that humans originated in Asia, largely because of its geographical positioning as a midpoint between Europe and the Americas. This theory, though lacking hard evidence, drove an ambitious generation of explorers and anthropologists eastward. One of them was Dutch anatomist Dubois, who ventured to the Indonesian island of Java in the late 1800s. In 1891, his team unearthed a partial skullcap and femur remains that Dubois insisted belonged to an ancient upright human ancestor. He called it Pithecanthropus erectus, or upright apeman, later to be classified more accurately as Homo erectus. At the time, few took Dubois seriously. The idea of a bipedal human ancestor was radical. His findings were dismissed, shelved, and forgotten. That is, until several decades later, when excavations near Beijing unearthed astonishingly similar remains. Skull fragments and teeth from several individuals who came to be known as Peking Man. The anatomical similarities were undeniable. These were not isolated anomalies. They were part of a widespread, successful species, as more fossils emerged from Africa, Georgia, and even Europe. The image of Homo erectus became clear. They had spread farther and wider than any human species before them. But what truly made Homo erectus extraordinary wasn't just their anatomy, it was their behavior. They were the first to harness fire, not just as a tool for survival, but as a communal resource, a hearth around which early culture could form. They likely cooked food, expanding their diets and improving nutrient absorption, giving rise to greater brain development over generations. They crafted sharper, more refined tools, like the Achillean hand axe, symmetrical, teardrop-shaped implement used for cutting meat, scraping hides, and even digging roots, unlike the scattered one-time-use tools of earlier species. These hand axes showed signs of planning and consistency across generations and regions. Most astonishingly, Homo erectus became the first humans to venture out of Africa, migrating across vast deserts, rivers, and even oceans. Evidence now suggests that they may have crossed water barriers, hinting at rudimentary seafaring capabilities, though we've yet to find definitive remains of rafts or boats. Their presence on islands like Flora's Recubal only by sea forces us to reevaluate what we thought we knew about their cognitive abilities. Their success wasn't short-lived. Homo erectus persisted for nearly 1.5 million years, a staggering achievement in evolutionary terms. That's over 500 times longer than modern humans have existed. They didn't just adapt to their world, they reshaped it through fire, movement, and innovation. And they didn't vanish without a legacy. Homo erectus gave rise to multiple descendants, possibly including Homo heidelbergensis, Homo antecessor, and ultimately Homo sapiens. We carry their DNA not just in our genes, but in our spirit, our ability to adapt, to move, to survive. They were the first of us to look beyond the horizon and keep walking, to face a wild world and say, we can go farther. So the next time you feel like a traveler, a survivor, a builder of dreams, you re-echoing the footsteps of an ancestor who once lit a fire in a cave and saw for the first time a world not of fear, but of possibility. That's the story of Homo erectus, the first great explorer of our kind. What if I told you the first real us wasn't us at all? Long before Homo sapiens ever carved symbols into cave walls or crossed frozen land bridges into new continents, there was another human, one whose shadow still stretches across the entire story of our kind. Its name was Homo erectus, and it may very well be the first creature to truly walk like us, hunt like us, and think like us. I've spent the last 2 decades tracing the footprints of this ancient ancestor, and the deeper I dig, the more I'm convinced. Homo erectus wasn't just a missing link, it was the spark. Let's start with the basics. Although often mistakenly labeled as the oldest bipedal human species, Homo erectus was unactually the first to stand upright. That title belongs to earlier hominins like Australopithecus afarensis. But erectus was the first to perfect the walk. Their gait was smooth, efficient, almost identical to modern humans. Combine that with modern limb proportions, long legs and shorter arms, and a flat face with a projecting nose, and you're looking at something astonishingly familiar. In fact, if you walked past a Homo erectus wearing modern clothes on a foggy morning, you might not notice anything strange until you got up close. But don't be fooled. Beneath that surface similarity lies a world of difference. Their skeletons were built like tanks. Compared to our relatively fragile frames, Homo erectus had denser bones and robust muscles. They were survivors, forged in a world where every meal had to be earned and every predator challenged. Still, what makes Homo erectus so fascinating isn't just what they looked like, it's where they went. This species had an extraordinary geographic spread, from the vast savannas of Africa to the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, all the way to the temperate zones of Europe. Remains have been found in Kenya, Georgia, China, and Indonesia. This wasn't a lucky fluke. It was a species built to move, to adapt, endure, and thrive across diverse landscapes, and the mystery deepens. For years, the story went like this. Homo erectus evolved in Africa around 2 million years ago, from a more primitive, human-like Homo habilis, then migrated outward. A great human exodus spurred by a changing climate, but something strange appeared in the fossil record. Remains from China and Indonesia are just as old, sometimes older, than their African counterparts. How could that be? A provocative theory emerged in 2011. What if Homo erectus didn't start in Africa? It would rewrite the map of human origins. That theory remains controversial. Most still support an African origin, but it underscores how much we still don't understand about this ancient explorer. What we do know is this: wherever they went, Homo erectus made their mark, not just through bones, but through behavior. They were among the first apex predators in human history, but erectus flipped the script. In archaeological sites across Africa and Eurasia, their bones appear alongside the remains of rhinos, hippos, wild boars, deer, horses, even elephants. In Kenya, fossil evidence shows them hunting crocodiles. They didn't just survive, they dominated. How did they do it? The answer again lies in their bodies and their minds. Homo erectus was bigger. Some stood over 6 feet tall. They were heavier, stronger, and more durable than any hominin before. But more importantly, they were runners. Unlike most animals, they didn't rely on claws or speed in short bursts. They relied on endurance, until the animal collapsed from heat exhaustion. This technique, called persistence hunting, gave them access to meat no other human had reliably claimed before. And that changed everything. Meat wasn't just fuel, it was a revolution. It allowed for bigger brains, longer childhoods, stronger social bonds, and in time, it sparked culture. Simple tools like hand axes emerge in their wake, shaped with intent and uniformity. There are even hints that they cared for their injured, proof that compassion may have emerged long before we thought. Perhaps most mysterious of all, how far they were willing to go. You'd think oceans would have stopped them, but evidence suggests otherwise. That means they crossed open water. No boats have been found, no paddles, no rafts, but they got there. Which means this species, 1.5 million years ago, had already begun to conquer the sea. We still argue about what this means. Did they build simple watercrafts? Were they swept away accidentally? Or was this intentional navigation the first breath of maritime exploration? The truth is, we may never know for sure. But what we can say is that Homo erectus changed everything. They weren't just survivors, they were builders, hunters, travelers, and perhaps even thinkers. They lasted longer than any other human species, nearly 1.5 million years. That's 6 times longer than modern humans have existed so far. And in the end, their legacy isn't found only in bones or tools, but in us, because somewhere in the twist of history, their story became ours. We walk because they walked. We hunt because they hunted. And if we listen closely enough to the wind across a cave mouth in Georgia or the still waters near Flores, maybe we'll hear the footsteps of the first to truly stand tall, not just upright, but human. If you stood on the edge of the African savanna 2 million years ago, you might have heard something strange footsteps, not just from prey, but from the predators who walked upright. And if you listened closer, you'd hear strategy in those footsteps, coordination, intelligence. These weren't just hunters, they were becoming human. This is the story of Homo erectus, one of our most successful ancestors. They didn't just survive, they changed the game. For nearly 2 million years, they roamed across Africa, Asia, and beyond, using a blend of endurance, weaponry, and collective behavior that reshaped the predator-prey relationship forever. They tracked animals across vast distances in the brutal midday heat, using their upright posture, sweat-based cooling, and sheer stamina to outlast prey. These hunts were slow, methodical, and terrifying for the prey. That is, imagine an antelope collapsing from exhaustion after being shadowed for hours. Homo erectus introduced a revolution in toolmaking, their intelligence powered by a brain averaging 1,030 cubic centimeters, roughly 80% the size of ours, today allowed them to conceptualize, plan, and manufacture advanced tools. This marked the beginning of the Aquilin Industrian era defined by large hand axes and cleavers. These tools weren't just for killing, they were for processing, butchering meat, cracking bones, stripping hides. What once required claw and fang could now be done with precision and efficiency. And their innovation didn't stop at the hand. Fossils and biomechanics suggest Homo erectus could throw accurately and with force. Their shoulder structure closely resembled ours, allowing them to hurl projectiles like rocks or spears. Long before formal spears appeared in the fossil record, it's very likely that simpler versions existed far earlier, perhaps even crafted by Homo erectus themselves. To other animals, these upright apes capable of flinging objects with deadly precision must have seemed like something out of a nightmare. But their most dangerous weapon wasn't stone. It was each other. Evidence from a set of 97 fossilized footprints found in Kenya reveals something extraordinary. A group of around 20 individuals walking in the same direction at the same time. What's striking is that one trail, based on foot size and spacing, seems to have been made by an all-male group. In other words, a hunting party. This discovery hints at an even deeper transformation: social organization, division of labor. If men hunted large, high-risk prey, and women gathered consistent resources like fruit and nuts, it implies something deeply human. Cooperation not just within family groups, but across larger social units. This hunting-gathering balance became the backbone of what we now recognize as early human society. Of course, Homo erectus didn't always succeed in their hunts, but when they did, the payoff was massive, suggesting a heavy dependency on megafauna for survival. Their large brains and bodies demanded high calories, and when the big game vanished, so did they. One Homo erectus fossil, dated to be that of an elderly individual, showed signs of advanced gum disease and complete tooth loss. In a world without blenders or soft bread, this should have been a death sentence. But this individual lived on. How? They were fed. Others in the group likely chewed food for them, or shared soft, nutrient-rich parts like brain or bone marrow. This wasn't just survival, it was care, compassion, a kind of primitive health care, long before hospitals or even language as we know it. It's easy to talk about Homo erectus in terms of stone tools and skeletons, but the truth is, they were us in blueprint form. They hunted with strategy, they walked with purpose, they shared food, they protected the weak, and though we may never know what they dreamed, or if they dreamed at all, we know this: they carried the spark that would one day become humanity. From the firelit edge of the savannah to the rain-drenched islands of Southeast Asia, Homo erectus didn't just adapt, they led the way. Imagine sitting by the flickering light of a fire 1.5 million years ago, surrounded not by the silence of beasts. This was Homo erectus' species, far more advanced, compassionate, and resourceful than we once believed. As a paleoanthropologist with 2 decades of experience reconstructing the lives of our ancient ancestors, I can confidently say that Homo erectus was not just a stepping stone to modern humans. They were innovators, caretakers, and survivors in their own right. Their world was raw and unforgiving, yet within it they cultivated some of the earliest sparks of humanity. Take, for instance, the remarkable case of a young boy who suffered from severe scoliosis, and an adult debilitated by skeletal fluorosis, both conditions that would have made hunting or defending oneself nearly impossible. Yet they lived long enough to leave fossilized evidence. This suggests something profound. Their groups didn't leave the weak behind. They cared, they protected, they adapted. This was not mere survival of the fittest, it was survival through community. But caring for the sick is only one piece of the puzzle. Homo erectus also pioneered food preservation, a revolutionary skill for a nomadic species. Likely methods included smoking and drying meats, allowing them to store surplus and support those unable to hunt. These techniques weren't primitive guesses, they were practical solutions born of experimentation and observation. And then came fire, the great transformer, although the exact moment of its discovery remains elusive. Charred bones and ash deposits suggest Homo erectus was harnessing natural fires as early as 1.5 million years ago. Initially, they didn't create fire, but captured it nurturing embers from lightning strikes or wildfires. They learned to keep it alive, using slow-burning fuels like dried dung. Some individuals likely became firekeepers, responsible for preserving flame across migrations, even into the icy frontiers of early Europe. Fire gave them more than warmth. It offered protection from predators. It made food safer, more digestible, and more nutritious. Over time, archaeological sites dated to 400,000 years ago show fire becoming widespread, implying they had likely unlocked the knowledge of how to create fire on demand. But perhaps the most overlooked power of fire was not physical, it was social. Gathered around flames, Homo erectus groups shared food, rested, and quite possibly spoke. For decades, it was believed they lacked the anatomy for speech, based on early fossils like the Turkana boy, whose underdeveloped respiratory muscles suggested mute communication. But deeper studies revealed that his deformities were not representative of the species. Other Homo erectus specimens show well-developed respiratory structures and Broca S. areate, the part of the brain tied to language, closely mirroring our own. Their hyoid bone, though less advanced, was capable of supporting a proto-language of primitive but meaningful system of vocal communication. Even if their speech wasn't as complex as ours, their collaborative success speaks for itself. This collaboration is further highlighted by their architecture. In 1962, a remarkable find in Tanzania unearthed a 1.7 million year old stone circle, a construction of volcanic rock and earth. Though damaged by time, it revealed their intentional shaping of environments. Whether a windbreak, a shelter, or a ritual space, it marked a leap in cognition. Later discoveries in Germany, dated to 700,000 years ago, include dwellings built around fire pits, suggesting that Homo erectus developed seasonal base camps, enabling them to settle in harsh winter territories once thought uninhabitable. These constructions weren't just functional, they were symbolic of permanence, planning, and adaptation. And to endure the cold, they didn't rely solely on fire or stone. Clothing, too, was part of their survival strategy. Though their garments were basic, nothing more than draped animal hides, they served a critical purpose. Since Homo erectus lacked insulating body hair, these early clothes may have been in use for up to 3 million years, long before their mastery of fire or tools. Each of these advancements, caregiving, preservation, fire, shelter, clothing, tells us something vital. Homo erectus was not a brute. They were builders, innovators, caretakers, and perhaps even storytellers. They didn't merely survive, they expanded, traversing open savannas, thick forests, and frozen valleys from Africa to Southeast Asia and beyond. They left behind not just bones and tools, but echoes of the first communities, the first warmth, the first flickers of what would one day become human civilization. When we trace our lineage, it's tempting to see history in sharp leaps from ape to man, from fire to cities. But the truth is more beautiful. The first real light in the dark came from a being who knew how to carry, flame, wrap their kin in fur, and sit beside them in the cold night in silence, but perhaps with a voice just beginning to form. And that voice, low, rough, imperfect, was ours. What if I told you that the first true explorers of our species weren't modern humans, but an ancient cousin who mastered land, sea, and survival for nearly 2 million years? We call them Homo erectus, and for over 1.9 million years, they walked the earth, adapted to its harshest landscapes, and perhaps most astonishingly ventured across seas long before maps, compasses, or even language as we know it. In the grand timeline of human evolution, Homo erectus wasn't just a stepping stone. They were a titan. Their story begins in Africa, where they evolved nearly 2 million years ago, with tall, upright bodies, relatively large brains, and endurance built for long-distance travel. Homo erectus wasn't just built for survival, they were built to move. They hunted with simple stone tools, harnessed fire, and adapted quickly to new environments. That adaptability allowed them to spread further than any human species before or since, from the grassy plains of East Africa to the frozen edges of Central Asia and the tropical islands of Southeast Asia. And it's those islands that hold one of the greatest mysteries and achievements of early human history. You see, fossils and artifacts have been discovered on islands like Flores, Timor, and Rhoda, places that, even at the lowest sea levels, were never connected to the mainland by land bridges. That means Homo erectus didn't just walk across continents, they must have crossed open water. Let that sink in. Over 800,000 years ago, long before Homo sapiens even existed, Homo erectus likely built rafts, planned voyages, and navigated ocean currents to reach entirely new lands. No other known animal, not even their primate cousins, had ever done this. They were the world's first mariners. Now, no physical remains of Homo erectus boats have survived. That's not surprising. Wood and fiber don't fossilize easily over hundreds of thousands of years. But the evidence is undeniable. Stone tools, butchered animal bones, and even engraved shells have been found on these isolated islands. These were not accidental castaways, these were communities. Crossing the sea isn't just about bravery, it's about foresight. It means gathering food for the journey, building vessels strong enough to survive rough waters, and organizing a group to leave the familiar behind. This kind of planning requires memory, cooperation, and a vision of something beyond the horizon. In short, Homo erectus didn't just survive, they imagined a future. And that changes everything we thought we knew about early humans. Their seafaring ability gave them an edge. While other hominins were bound to one region, Homo erectus kept moving. That movement gave them access to new ecosystems, new food sources, and a buffer against local extinctions. It's one major reason why they lasted so long. In fact, of all known human species, Homo erectus holds the record for longevity, existing nearly 6 times longer than our own species has so far. For context, Homo sapiens have been around for about 300,000 years. The next longest-lived species, Homo habilis, managed about 600,000 years, but Homo erectus, they lived for close to 2 million. That's a testament to their adaptability, intelligence, and resilience. But even titans fall. The end of Homo erectus wasn't caused by war, disease, or another species. It was nature, specifically climate change. Toward the end of their existence, their preferred environments, open woodlands and grasslands, began to vanish. Global temperatures shifted, rainforests expanded, their prey disappeared. The ecosystems they had mastered for so long began to crumble around them. The final known population of Homo erectus lived on the island of Java in present-day Indonesia. For thousands of years, it was their last stronghold. But as the dense rainforest swallowed the island and food became scarcer, even these resilient survivors couldn't adapt quickly enough. The last known remains date to about 108,000 years ago, as a geological blink before our ancestors began to dominate the globe. Their extinction wasn't dramatic, but it was significant. They disappeared quietly, leaving behind stone tools, ash from ancient fires, and bones fossilized in the earth. And yet their legacy lives on not just in museum cases, but in us. Some of their innovations, long-distance travel, group coordination, basic tools, paved the way for everything Homo sapiens would later refine. They were not brutes. They were not missing links. They were adventurers, survivors, and pioneers. And if we dare to look back with empathy, we might see ourselves not just as their descendants, but as carriers of their dreams, the dreams of walking beyond the horizon, of building something new, of surviving against all odds. That's the story of Homo erectus. Not just the longest-lived human species, but, perhaps, in many ways, the most successful. And if you found this journey into deep history fascinating, consider what came before. The Australopithecus, our tree-dwelling ancestors, set the first stone in place. Or look ahead at how Homo sapiens inherited a world already touched by pioneers we never knew we had. Because the story of humanity isn't one straight line, it's a vast, branching tree filled with triumph, adaptation, and echoes of lost civilizations. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, keep looking back to understand where we're headed next.